Good afternoon, beach-loving, barrel-chasing business owners. We are live right now with Oscar Trimboli for this episode of Barrels and Business. During this hour or so, we plan to bring you an entertaining conversation where you're going to lean in and get some really tangible tips on how you can use deep listening not only to grow your business, service your customers better, but build better relationships, not only with your partners, but your children and your friends as well. So as I mentioned, today, my guest is the amazing Oscar Trimboli, who may or may not be related to Australia's most infamous mafia family. We're going to touch on that in a minute, mister.
Do so at your peril.
I'm like, oh, do we want to say this live? I don't know. Like, is this the right thing to do? But we'll dabble a toe. We'll dabble a toe. And so what I want to do is give you a little bit of a frame up on who Oscar is. Oscar is on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners in the world. He's an author, a host, and the host of the Apple award-winning podcast, Deep Listening. He's a sought-after keynote speaker. He's passionate about using his gifts of listening to bring positive change to homes, workplaces, and the world. He's been in the board of directors and executive teams for local and regional organizations. He's experienced firsthand the transformational. I'm losing my words today. Oscar, I think you made me nervous. What's happening to me right now?
I'm listening.
You're listening. So is everybody else. You've got so many accolades. Like, you've worked with Cisco, Google, HSBC, News Corp, PayPal, Qantas, all of the things. Can anyone tell I'm dyslexic and I can't get through a bio? Let's touch on the important stuff. You live in Sydney with your amazing wife, Jeannie, and you help first-time runners and, wait for it, beach lovers, ocean swimmers to conquer their fears and contribute to the cure of cancer as a part of the Can2 Cancer Research Charity. Is that correct?
Yeah. I learned to swim in the ocean as an adult. In fact, while I was going to school, mate, I was always confused. I was concreting when I was growing up. That was my school holidays. You know, so back to your question about the infamous mafia family. Can you imagine if your dad's business was called Trimboli's Concreting Services? There is a fable that you get cement boots, you know.
The first thing that come to my mind was a pair of cement boots.
So, but the point of the story is growing up from the age of 6, I got in my dad's red Dodge or grey ute, and we would travel out to growing parts of Sydney where new houses and factories were being built. And that was my school holidays. And I'd always come back to school and people would tell me about holidays. And I'd go, oh, yeah, where did you work? And it's like, no, I went to the beach. And it's like, what's a beach? Like, I never saw a beach till I was 16 years old. And I never learned to swim until I was an adult. And I never learned to swim until I was an adult about 10 years ago, where I was watching a group of swimmers in Palm Beach in Sydney as opposed to Palm Beach in Queensland. And when we were walking from Palm Beach to Whale Beach, me and my wife Jen, and she said, hey, super coach, you reckon you can do anything? I challenge you this time next year, you swim from Palm Beach to Whale Beach. And I was like, you know I can't swim. She goes, yeah, but you can tell people they'd get anything done if they put their mind to it. And that's a whole story we can go and spend some time with a little bit later on. It's a great story about listening, or the lack of it.
Well, why stop now?
All right, so there we go. We're walking over these big cliff tops to go from Palm Beach to Whale Beach, and it's Australia Day. It's a Sunday. And it's about 37 degrees. And I thought I was sweating more than usual after Jen had put the challenge out to me. And the only thing going through my head, Jade, is what's going to be a really plausible excuse for this middle-aged dude to not swim in the ocean. Now, I got to watch everybody cross the finish line, and there were young kids, 10 years old. There were 60-year-old people. There were people with one arm. There were people with one leg. There were people who were all shapes and sizes, and every excuse I made up just completely went away. So I said to Jen on the drive home, give me a week, I'm going to come back to you with the answer to your question. So I knew somebody called Judy who only trains adults in how to swim. And I said, Judes, can you teach me how to swim? Of course I can, Oscar. That's easy. I said, can you teach me how to swim so I can swim from Palm Beach to Wild Beach in 12 months' time? Of course I can. That's easy, Oscar. And I thought, okay. So for weeks and weeks and weeks, we were doing really basic stuff, Jade. It's like blowing bubbles, right? It's like, here's a guy in his late 40s blowing bubbles in a pool. Anyway, eventually after 3 months, every Sunday afternoon, 4 p.m. in the middle of winter, Judy would come over after we'd swim for a plate of soup, and we'd talk about the progress we'd made. And by this time, I'd be able to swim in the swimming pool, 2Ks nonstop. I thought, pretty good, right?
How long's the swim from Palm Beach to Whale Beach?
Depending on the currents, between 2.8 and 3.1 Ks. So it's a swim. It's not a paddle. And so Judy said, you're ready to go to the beach. So we go to the beach. We go to Manavale Beach in Sydney, just south of Palm Beach by about 10 Ks. And Judy just spends the first week showing me the beach. We were sitting up above it, and she was explaining rips, and she was explaining the wind and how different waves were forming, and just really basic things. And then for 2 weeks, we'd get closer and closer to the water. And then on the third week, we'd go into the water. And then the fourth week, we'd swim. So she's taking me in really, really slowly. By the fifth week, she taught me how to go under the waves and how to adapt to the ocean. And by the fifth week, she said, you're ready. We're going to go out past the breakers and we're going to swim in the open ocean, which was fine. Week 6, we did that. She said, now you're just going to swim. And it's pretty, relative to the break zone, it's pretty easy. Well, at least I thought. So I swam, I blew up, my face was red, I was out of breath, and I swam like 5 meters. And Judy goes, what's wrong? I was like, I was freaking out, I was losing my breath, I'm on the other side of the breakers. What the heck have I got myself in for? And she says, just swim again, relax, breathe. I was like, okay, I can do that. Same thing. This time, maybe 3-4 strokes, and I'm just panicking and the water's not working, the breathing's not working. She says, I'm going to swim underneath you and look up at what you're doing. I said, sure, no problem. And I do 3-4 strokes, and she just points with a finger and says, go up, and I do. And she comes out and she goes, you're not breathing. I said, of course not. She goes, were you breathing like this in the pool? I said, yeah. She goes, so you swam 2 kilometers without breathing out underwater? I said, yeah, I would breathe in and out when I came above the water. Isn't that how everybody did it? She says, Oscar, you didn't listen to me. That's not how I taught you. You got to breathe out when you're under the water, and then you breathe in when you come back out. It's like, oh. So we went back to the pool for 6 weeks to get me to swim properly. And, you know, there's a good example of not listening. Could have cost me my life.
Your whole life, yes.
Yeah, but wind the clock forward, and, you know, that year, me and my wife, we swam from Palm Beach to Wild Beach. The ladies go out first. It's all in heats by age group. And what was extraordinarily weird, my wife started 10 minutes before me, but we finished at exactly the same time and met up in the breakers as we came in. And that, I can just picture that right now, and it's a pretty special memory. So I'm the evil villain for surfers. I'm the ocean swimmers that get in the way, you know. when
I
we
think
go when we go out every Saturday morning at Mona Vale Beach, we're very conscious of where the surfers are and we stay well away from them. But occasionally on a messy day, we might come into contact. And I
yeah,
always say everybody's got a place on the beach, and everybody just needs to be aware of their environments and respect everyone around them. And we always find a really simple compromise when we're out there.
yeah. I I get so scared when I see the ocean swimmers. I'm like, you're out there all unprotected and naked to the elements, and
Literally.
I'm like, I don't know how you guys do it.
I've
It's
never swum in a wetsuit.
really,
Yeah, so from November to April we swim in the open ocean, and there was a couple of freezing days for sure, and
yeah,
I could feel the blood kind of move in towards my heart and away from my extremities and stuff like that.
yeah.
I sharks, they don't worry me. You know why? If a shark gets me, it's a great funeral story. Like no one's going to top that. But you know what really worries me? A nest of jellyfish. That's what freaks me
Oh,
out.
uh, no. I got stung a few years ago down at Snapper, and I'd been out there surfing. Mick Fanning was out, and I got this blue bottle wrapped around my leg, and it looked like barbed wire had attacked me, and it was so red and sore. It was so red and sore that the reason why I mentioned Mick Fanning was I went out that night with my girlfriend, and we were in a dark, cool little whiskey bar. It's dark. And Mick Fanning come and tapped me on the shoulder, and he's like, "What happened to your leg?" And I'm like, he's like, "Oh wait, I saw you surfing today. Did you paddle through that swarm of blue bottles?" I'm like, "Evidently, yes." And it looked like it was gonna scar for so long. I had the dots for months, and so painful. Yeah, there was a guy that was out there though with me. He got it way worse. It was across his face. Like he duck dived into one. It was across his face, and it was. Oh, I don't know, mate. I don't know if I'm more scared of the jellyfish than the shark though.
Shark will get you quicker. Think about how long you're in
Are
pain
we
with the
dead?
jellyfish.
Are we dead though if the shark gets us, or just mangled?
I'm hopeful that they do it in one
Yeah,
swift go. As I say to everybody, it's like don't be looking out for sharks, because when they come and get you, they come from beneath. So
see, you don't see them. I mean,
yeah, that's
no.
right. But
Yeah.
I think surfers have a fighting chance because they got the board in between.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like you're all naked and shit out there. Like,
Yeah, but I never heard stories about ocean swimmers getting taken by sharks. I'll tell you a great story. My very good friend James Batar, he's an ocean swimmer, ultra marathon ocean
ooh,
swimmer. He's like swum from the North Island to South Island of New Zealand. He's swum around New York. He swum from Catalina Island to the mainland. He swum from Robben Island to the South African
oh wow,
mainland. Where's a
cool.
boatload of sharks in there, right? Um,
Hmm.
he's swum the Bering Strait, so that's the strait between Alaska and Russia.
Wow.
And what's amazing about James, he does all this completely blind.
Yeah, where's your excuses now, hey?
Yeah, so James said to me, I said, how do you navigate, James? He says, oh, I got a boat or someone on a paddleboard. It's one whistle right, two whistles left, and three whistles you don't really want to know about. It's like, and he always does this really long pause when he tells this story. Three whistles. He says three whistles means shark, get that out of the water. He's only ever had one whistle. That's a three whistler, and that was off Manly coming around the headland. And they didn't blow the whistle because they thought the shark was far enough away. And they brought him back. He had a shower and all of that. And he said, oh, by the way, there was a shark out there. And James went, well, I couldn't see it.
I'm very glad I didn't see it. Oh, that's great. So that's great.
James is the kind of person he goes and visits around the world with all this races that he does. And when you get taken into a hotel room when you're blind, the concierge or a porter will show you around the room. So they'll grab your hand, put it on the wall. This is the TV, this is the remote, this is the bathroom, etc. And they will leave. And just as they're about to leave, James will always say, "Well, are you going to show me where the light switch is?" He's got a great outlook on life.
Pun intended.
And the funniest thing about him is he works at the tax office.
Oh.
So if you've ever got a GST dispute, there's a good chance James Batar may eventually be involved.
Wow. No. Hi, Jan. No. Oh, goodness. Okay, I want to switch gears and ask you a question. Why are you on a quest to make 100,000 deep listeners?
Well, I'm on a quest to create 100 million deep listeners.
Oh, 100 million, sorry. Oh, there's my bad listening.
No, but it started off with 100,000. And I was telling someone I admire and respect in business enormously, it's like, I'm on this quest to create 100,000 deep listeners in the world. He said, "Hey, before we talk about that, come back next month and add a 0. It's like, I can't do 1 million. He says, no, just go away and think about it. We'll chat about something else. I come back next month. I go, yeah, I can do 1 million. I figured it out. He goes, great. Let's come back next month when you've added a 0. I was like, oh, God, how long are we going to play this game for? He says, it's a really simple exercise. If you can achieve your goal in your lifetime, it's not ambitious enough.
Ooh.
And just adding those zeros on got me to a point. Like today, I can see 100 million deep listeners because I was chatting to a guy in Atlanta, Kevin Monroe, and he was chatting to me and he goes, 100 million, you're going to do that by yourself. Even McDonald's had to open up a few more outlets, Oscar. How can I help you open up a few more outlets? So as you go and talk to people about it, this thing emerges that people want to be attracted to the idea or not. Look, Jade, back to your question though. I have to thank Tracy. I was in a boardroom in Sydney. I was on a video conference. There was 18 people on this video conference, and pre-COVID days, and no records now. It's probably a small one. And we were in Sydney. Our head office was in Seattle. Our regional office was in Singapore, and we had all these people negotiating the annual budget in March. The reason I always remember this day in March, because there was a bushfire in the local national park, and the smokers made its way into the air conditioning system overnight. So there was this smell of bushfires in the air. And at the 20-minute mark, Tracy looked me straight in the eye and said, "See me after the meeting." And at that 20-minute mark, I just had one thought going through my head, Jade. How many weeks of salary have I got left? Because I'm going to get fired. It's kind of like when a lady says to a man, "Honey, we need to talk." That's not good when they say that.
Yeah. It's never good when anyone says it, is it?
Honey, we need to talk. And the meeting finishes. I thought it went pretty good, actually. We got about the budget we wanted, just a little bit more. They didn't get the budget they want, but it was close enough. And Tracy, I said, "Do you want to still have that chat?" She says, "Yes, please close the door behind you." It's like, oh, I'm definitely getting fired.
Waiting for the shoe to drop.
Yeah, and she says to me, "You have no idea what you did at the 20-minute mark." And I went, no. In my head, I'm going, no, I have no idea, and I'm definitely getting fired. And I think I've got 6.5 weeks' money in the bank account. She said, "Look, let me be blunt. At the 20-minute mark, you completely change the course of the meeting. If you could code the way you listen like you did at the 20-minute mark, you could change the world." Now, in that profound moment, Jade, the only thing going through my head was not if you could code the way you listen, you change the world. It's like, I'm not getting fired. that was the only thing going through my head. I'm not getting fired. I'm not getting fired. I'm not getting fired. And in my head, there's a whole story going on. And whatever Tracy said after, if you could code the way you listen, you could change the world, it was just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
He could have been reading out of a dictionary. I couldn't tell you anything she said after that. And to be honest, I walked out of the room and never thought anything of it till 6 weeks later when Brian, our chief financial officer, said to me, and we had to negotiate the budgets with the Australian states as a result of that. He said, can you come to the budget meeting and audit my listening? I said, Brian, I haven't got time for that. I've just got $1.6 billion US budget line I've got to deliver for next year. I better get on with it, not sitting around listening to you. He said, no, seriously, it's going to make a big difference for me. And then for the first time in my life, I had to watch somebody else and try and code how they were listening compared to how I listened. So that's where it all started.
What was the difference?
There were many differences. I think the big thing I noticed with Brian was he was trying to answer every question without understanding if that was the question people were really asking. So here's a really simple bit of maths. This is the neuroscience of the brain when it comes to listening. If you were to write down one thing today, it would be this. Yeah. It's called the 125-900 rule. I speak at 125 words a minute. Well, I actually speak a little slower than that, but on average, you speak between 125 and 150 words a minute. But you can think at 900 words a minute. And people who've done complex things or run your own business, you're probably thinking at about 1,600 words per minute. But the average is 900. So I can speak at 125 words a minute. If I'm a horse race caller, I can speak at about 200 words a minute and you can still understand me. By the way, at 300 words a minute, blind people can still listen to audio books at full comprehension. So you can listen at up to 400 words per minute. But let's come back to the problem of the speaker. If I've got 900 words stuck in my head and I can only say 125 at any one time, if you just talk to the person about the very first thing they say, there's 800 words still stuck in their head that they haven't said. So what we're doing is we're taking a punt. We're taking a chance that we're having the right conversation with only 11% of what people are saying. Is there any wonder why people are confused? Is there any wonder why your tradie didn't do a great job on the back of your van? Is there any wonder why customers pick the competitor because you didn't listen to them? Is there any wonder why you get divorced? Is there any wonder why parents and teachers at a parent-teacher meeting feel like someone's speaking German and someone else is speaking French? Is there any wonder why there's confusion, chaos, and conflict in the world? The 125-900 rule, the neuroscience of listening, explains that if you just let them say the thing that they've just finished saying and something else, you could remove another 50% of confusion by just saying nothing. Now, the 125-900 rule, it's good to know that, but what can you do with it? So can I give you 3 tips?
Please.
These are 3 tips that are really simple. In fact, there's only 3 words in each of the 3 tips. Make it even simpler. If you can practice these phrases, you will be pleasantly surprised, or in fact shocked, at what they say next. So I'm going to give you 2 of the 3 first, and then I'm going to pause because I'm going to ask you if you've ever heard anybody say a particular phrase, Jay. So what happens is you go to the tradie and the tradie explains to you why he messed up the dimensions on the back of your van. And he says, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. And what you want to do is tell him that he's wrong. But here's a phrase you can use. Tell me more. Tell me more. The other phrase you can use, and think of it as the or question, AWE, and what else? And what else? Now, I'll give you the third tip in a sec, Jay, but I'm wondering, have you ever just paused long enough when you're talking to somebody and they draw a really deep breath in? It kind of sounds like this. They go, you know what? What I should have said was, or they say, actually, what I meant to have said was, or they'll say, what matters the most to me right now is. Now, the code is they'll take that deep breath in. Now, by the way, if your head's stuck in a laptop or a mobile phone or something else, you're not going to be able to even notice that breathing. But in that moment where they take that breath, and that breath is really, really critical because they're slowing down, they're connecting to something called a parasympathetic nerve, that part of the body that says everything's okay. There's no shark, there's no jellyfish in the water around us.
I'm safe.
And they say the next 125 words. And then what they say to you, without you even fixing their problem, they'll say to you, Jade, you're such a good listener. Have you ever heard people use those phrases?
Oh, yes. But I'm blessed to have come from a pretty deep community. We got connected by the amazing Amrit Sandhu. So I'm blessed that I am around humans like this, but you certainly do not hear it enough. And the power, I've seen the power of it. Not that you want to use it for evil, but salespeople, and this was a conversation I had with Luke Farr back in a previous episode, just that stopping and tell me more and the probing. But I loved the link that you just said then about the parasympathetic, I can't say this. Sympathetic nervous system, that safety and breathing is that key thing, right? When they take a deep breath, it tells the system, I don't have to breathing up in here freaking out. Yeah. Then they're safe, and that's when they feel like they can let their guard down and say what they really mean, right?
Yeah. Do you want tip number 3?
Yes.
This is the ninja move. This is if Yoda was here from Star Wars, he'd be telling us. If Bruce Lee was here, he'd be showing us this move. If Mick Fanning was here, if Lane Beachley was here, she'd be telling us about this move. So listen really carefully to this one. Listen really carefully. You ready? Here it comes. If you got comfortable with the sound of silence, you would transform a lot of conversations from transactional to transformational. You would be allowing the other person to feel heard, and them feeling like if you're in business, you're somebody who can help them out with other problems, not just the one that they're coming to you. If you're at home with the kids and you're trying to figure something out, sometimes just slowing everything down and just being silent is a great way to go. See, in the West, we have these wonderful phrases called the awkward silence, the pregnant pause, this deafening silence. Yet in the East and in our Aboriginal mobs and nations, in Polynesia, in Maori culture, in Inuit culture in Alaska, in the jungles of South America and Africa, in any ancient culture, silence is a sign of wisdom, it's a sign of authority, it's a sign of respect, it's a sign of curiosity. And somewhere in the West, we've decided that we're not going to listen to silence and it's awkward. Here's my tip for listening to silence. Treat it like another word. Listen to the beginning, the middle, and the end of silence fully, completely, and respectfully, and they will usually say something more. And if the world just knew the 125/900 rule, my work is done. But it needs to be even more basic than that, because listening to the other person is the wrong place to start listening. We actually need to listen to ourselves first. Too many of us have too many browser tabs opened up in our mind.
I literally said that yesterday. I'm like, there's too many tabs open in my brain.
Too many of us have our own radio station playing when we're turning up to a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Too many of us are thinking about lunch, dinner, the weekend.
Squirrel. Oh, what? Nah.
Well, in fact, it's happening for you right now listening to me, because the 125/400 rule says you can listen to 3 times more things than I can say, and you're genetically programmed to be distracted. We can have peripheral vision, but we can also have peripheral hearing, and that distracts us too. So the difference between a good listener and a great listener, a good listener doesn't listen any better from a great listener. The great listeners know when they're distracted quicker and come back into the conversation faster. So 3 quick tips to get yourself ready for listening. Tip number 1, switch off all the devices.
Mm.
And if you're doing video conference, then switch off all the notifications. And if you're doing video conference, move the webcam as close as possible to the other speaker and look at that webcam. Don't be seduced by your own photo. So tip number 1, lose the tech. In fact, use the tech. Don't let the tech use you.
I loved what you did without me having to ask you to do it before this. Do you remember what it was? And I was like, thank you.
Switch your phone into flight mode.
Thank you. I did it just before we jumped on. That's a huge thing, that even because I hear the vibration. I don't need to have my alarm on actual sound in the morning. I have my phone just on vibration to wake me up. So even that, people think they won't get distracted, but it's crazy.
Yeah, and I interviewed Professor Thomas Andrelon, who's done a study about how you actually not only can hear while you sleep, but you can listen while you sleep.
Mm.
And if you ever want to know how's that possible, ask any mum who's just given birth to a baby. They can distinguish the sound of their own child from any other sound or any other child's scream as well. So tip number 1, Jade, use the tech. Don't let the tech use you. Tip number 2, drink water. Glass of water every half an hour. There's a good rule. A hydrated brain is a listening brain. The brain is 5% of body mass, but it consumes 26% of blood sugars. It's a hungry organ. And by the way, listening happens in the modern part of the brain, just behind the back of the skull. It's called the prefrontal cortex. And if your brain hurts, have you ever been in a conversation where you go, oh, my head hurts? Well, it's because you're dehydrated. It's not because your head hurts. Drink more water.
I often say my brain hurts. Actually, I had a client yesterday. I could see him processing. I'm like, is your brain hurting?
Drink water. Drink water. Same thing. It sends a signal to the parasympathetic nerve that everything's okay. And if you ever get distracted in a conversation, just drink a glass of water. And when I get distracted in a conversation, I literally put my hand on the glass of the water, and that's my short circuit to go back in the conversation, Oscar.
That's your hack to get back into the conversation quicker.
It is my hack. Here's hack number 3. It's the one you probably haven't seen me doing, but I've been doing it the whole time. Hack number 3, the deeper you breathe, the deeper you listen.
I learned this on your podcast this morning, by the way.
Thanks for listening. There was a piece of research done in Ottawa in Canada. 1993, 410 students were all hooked up to a device that measured their oxygen levels while they were in conversation. And 2 things happened. They had to rate how good the other person was as a listener and how much they thought the conversation progressed. The most productive conversations, as measured by people self-rating and other rating the conversation improved the most, had the highest oxygen levels. And here was the bit that blew everyone out of the water. The 5 most productive conversations, the breathing between the speaker and the listener became synchronized.
Some NLP magic right there.
Oh, I don't know what NLP is, so you might have to explain that to me, but I'll just call it magic.
Straight out magic.
Okay.
Wow.
So we don't have to breathe like an Olympic weightlifter.
That went off.
None of that. None of that. Just make sure you breathe in through your nose, down the back of your throat, all the way to the bottom of your diaphragm, and then out through your mouth. And forget everything else, just in through your nose and out through your mouth 3 times. If you can do that, it will send a signal both to the parasympathetic nerve and also to the limbic system, the primitive part of the brain that says, where's the tiger, where's the tiger, where's the tiger? And will get you ready to shut down the browser tabs in your own mind so you're available to the other person to speak. So at the moment, Jade, I'm doing hundreds of webinars over any month. And the most commented on thing in all my webinars is the 5 minutes I give people at the 15-minute mark where I say, switch off your webcam, put your mic on mute, sit down by yourself where you are and just listen to yourself for the next 5 minutes. Not the fancy pants 125/900 rule, not anything about neuroscience, just their ability to listen to themselves for 5 minutes in complete silence is the most transformational thing.
No.
So there's the 3 tips to get ready. You know, drink water, switch off your device, and just take 3 deep breaths. And if you ever struggle in a conversation, like I'm not following, or just take 3 deep breaths. And a phrase I'm famous for using is like, I'm really sorry, I got distracted. Do you mind just going back again? And in doing that, I'm sending 2 signals to them. I care enough about you to ask you to tell me that again, where I'm not trying to figure out what you said in reverse order. And the other thing I'm saying, I'm a human and I get distracted too. And most times people smile. Occasionally they say, yeah, that happens to me too. But too many of us fake it. And we have really unproductive conversations. You know, it just got me thinking about Mick. He was a bit of a joker client of mine. He was a CEO of a big tech company. And he called me. I was traveling over the Harbour Bridge, Jade. It was about 8:16. I think it was like about right on that time as I was crossing the bridge. And he said, you nearly cost me my marriage last Friday night. Like that was the opening words. It's like, this is an important client. My parasympathetic nerve was nowhere. My limbic system was going, oh, whoa. So I just took a deep breath and said, tell me more. He said, last Friday, you nearly cost me my marriage. My wife had just put the kids to bed and she said, honey, we need to talk. Oh, we don't like hearing that, do we? He says, so we sat down at the dinner table. I sat diagonally on the table. I didn't want to sit head on. And there's a tip we'll come back to when we're talking about how to listen to teenagers, by the way, Jay.
Yes.
His wife simply said, save me the trouble. Tell me who you're having an affair with and we can get over this and move on. And in his head, he said, I'm freaked out. My limbic system's going crazy. And I just want to argue with her. But I take one deep breath and say, what's this about? A version of tell me more. She says, look, for the last 90 days, you've paid me so much attention. I know you're having an affair. So just tell me who it is and we can move on.
You taught him how to listen to her.
And he says, look, it's not who you think it is. She says, don't dodge it. Just tell me the truth. Who is it? We can move on. I don't want any carry on. I just want to move on.
His name is Oscar.
Well, Mick's a bit of a joker. So Mick says, well, it's not who you think it is. It's a man. And his poor wife bursts into tears, jumping to all kinds of conclusions. I don't know what they would have been. There's no. It's not what you think. This guy at work, he told me this would happen at home. He warned me not to try this out at home, but I didn't listen to him. I've been learning how to listen at work, and I've been trying it out on you.
Practicing on you.
Now, the final part of this story is she said, Mick, we've been married for 12 years. I've never felt sexier than I have in the last 90 days, even when we were courting. For 3 years before we got married, you never treated me like this. I felt so sexy and I knew you had to be having an affair. Anyway, Mick said the rest of the story is X-rated. He said, "I bet had my best night since my honeymoon and all this kind of stuff." But I always say to people, be careful how you listen because it sometimes has unintended consequences.
Do you need to tell them in advance, like, just so you know?
I do. I always warn people.
No,
All
but
the
they need to tell their partners in advance.
No. All the evidence, all the research I've done is only in the workplace. I always say in my speeches and everything, do not try this at home with your spouses and loved ones because it will have some unintended consequences. Now, I've got various versions of the mixed story. I've heard a version of that from a woman's perspective, a kid's perspective, all of that. But the reason it was so powerful is so few of us actually listen to. So few of us people take the time to hear us. So listening's powerful.
It's just amazing. I love that story. The thing when you were saying before about the silence that came up for me is, especially in the sort of spiritual world, it's the version of holding space, and that is where the people feel heard and appreciated and safe, right? Because by just giving them the silence and the space to be, oh, I just got goosebumps, is what's going to bring you closer to them. And I think that's why the power of silence is so beautiful.
And I think it brings them closer to themselves. I think that's the first layer they explore, which allows them, once they know themselves, they can know someone else too.
Yeah. Oh, that could go into all the different layers. Like, if you need to love yourself, like if you can't love yourself, how can someone else love you? If you can't listen to yourself and tolerate it, then who else is going to?
Yeah.
You're going to be accepted.
Yeah, I'm super curious about the story that goes with your surfboard. I'm curious.
This board.
Yeah.
What would you like to know about the story of this board?
Well, what's the story of Notox? I know you kind of picked it up recently. I've been listening to you on social media in preparation for the interview.
I noticed that because you asked me about my band and the story with the cupboard yesterday. So the Notox board, it fell in my lap, really. And it's a story of the universe listening to me, really. Ooh, penny drop. I had been saying that I needed more people to go surfing with because being a girl and there's not a lot of other girls around that surf, especially to shortboard. Although on the Gold Coast there's a lot more than per head per capita than most places. And I'd been talking to my roommate saying I really need to make some new friends that surf now that I'm grounded in Australia. I'm making my home here more. And I knew I was in a group for surfing females called the Surf Witches. And I jumped onto the group to have a look, and kind of, this is my penny drop. I hadn't even put that conversation with this part. And all of a sudden a girl put on there saying, does any other girls here ride a shortboard, and does anyone ride beach breaks? Because everyone else rides longboards and point breaks. And I was like, well, I try. I give it a go. And she's like, oh, well, whereabouts are you? I said, Palm Beach. She's like, no shit. My boyfriend lives like just behind the Macca's. I'm like, that's across the road. And she's like, want to go for a surf tomorrow? I'm down. I'm like, yeah, that'd be amazing. Now, I'd also been saying that week that I really wanted to get a new surfboard. And I've got a Kelly Slater board. Kelly does, and it's Firewire. They do more eco-based boards and things. And I was like, should I get one of those? I'm going to podcast the guy who created Firewire with Kelly, Neve. But I'm like, do I want one of those? Is that the right one? I need to do some research. And then I looked at Louise to stalk her, figure out who the hell I'm going to go surfing with and make sure I can pick her out on the beach. And she worked for this company called Notox. And obviously the word Notox, we always talk about being no tox in the house and not using the chemicals and all of that. I was like, okay, I've got to know about this. And she started telling me like, yeah, she was just super passionate about being less impact on the environment. And there was these company out of France that was using bioresin and flax to make boards, and how good it was for not only the environment, but most importantly for the humans making the boards with breathing in the chemicals and everything. And I'm like, that sounds amazing. Like, but I had this fear of buying another new board that I haven't tested in case it's not right. And I'm still kind of learning. I'm not great with knowing all of the stuff. And so it's like, I don't even know. I thought my other board was too small for me and I needed a bigger board because I wasn't advanced enough for it, and just a little bit kind of clueless and no one really to turn to for the answers. And they just said, do you know what? We'll lend you one of our boards for a couple of weeks and you can have a go on it until you feel comfortable, and we can swap it out with another one. And I'm like, that's pretty big. Like they're $1,350, and to go just take it. I'm like, oh, I've never been to South Stratty, known for breaking surfboards. Do you mind if I take it? And they're like, well, you'll find out if you can ride it if you go there. I'm like, you sure? So they let me take it. While I was there, I saw 3 broken boards and a broken ankle. I felt like I nearly broke myself, but the board didn't break. And that was one of their big claims to fame. I don't want to quote the number. It's something like 11,000 boards built, 250 snapped. Like, it's a ridiculous amount. So they also last longer, which means less impact on the environment because they don't break all the time because the flax has flex in it. And yeah, so it was just like all these synergies of the world.
Well, what about the ingredients and stuff? How's it help people who are building the boards, and what does it come wrapped in and stuff like that? Have they thought through that?
They did. So it's bioresin. Now, I don't know all the chemical details of the bioresin, but the bioresin is, hence by the name bio, it's better for the environment, but it's low tox and it's low fume and it doesn't impact the respiratory as bad. Also, I'm actually podcasting Lou to get all the details, so we haven't gone through everything, but the way they shrink wrap it to not have to use the normal epoxy or the resins, it goes in this special eco bag to shrink it, and the brown you can see on it is flax, and that's like the special coating that give the board the strength and the flexibility, and obviously that's being a natural product.
Well, it doesn't look broken, so it looks like it survived. Stradbroke.
Yeah, this is my brand new one. Theirs also survived. I gave it back in one piece. Unlike my poor Slater board that is not doing so well after taking it to D-bar. But it put me on a mission then. I was like, well, if I've got this beautiful environmentally friendly board, I have to get all the equipment for it as well. So I've got I'll hold it up. I've got a Kelly Slater deck grip. Can we see? Oh.
That's it. Yeah, you got it now, yeah.
So rather than being made out of just normal foam or plastics or anything like that, it's made out of algae.
Cool.
Which is really cool. The fins, and this my friend Lou, because I asked her, obviously being eco, where do I get what stuff do I get? The fins are John Florence, I think, or they're Futures, and they're made out of recycled fishing nets, which is super cool. And Slater, because Slater's so pro environment and being less impact, he bought out this company called, I never can say it, Revolve You, these. And so this is made out of Ulex, which is like recycled plastic bottles. They're on a mission to create products that are more sustainable without compromising performance. So Kelly Slater bought them out, so they're now Slater Designs to get them more mass production. So these are all recycled as well. And the other epic thing is, if you snap a leash, often you throw the whole thing away. They've actually got the parts come apart and you can just replace the bit that got broken. So
that's cool.
And do you know what I love about all of that?
What?
You brought that up because you listened to me say how passionate I am about sharing and trying to impact people on being the ripple effect of using less and being environmentally friendly.
There you go. Did you feel heard?
I felt heard and loved and appreciated and important.
All right. Well, let's talk about some villains as we wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about your wallpaper.
Yeah, well, behind me are the 4 villains of listening. How did I discover the 4 villains of listening? I didn't. My clients helped me. My clients kept saying, Oscar, could you do a questionnaire so I know where all these things that are in your head? I was like, I don't want to do a questionnaire. It feels like work. Anyway, I did a questionnaire because they asked me. And The difference between hearing and listening is taking action. So too many of us hear things and don't take the action. So I always say listening is before, during, and after the conversation. Everybody goes, how can you listen after the conversation, Oscar? I said, you know when you haven't been heard after the conversation, because someone will say, I'll send you that proposal in 24 hours, and they don't. Or they'll say, I'll go and track down that information and I'll send it to you in the next week, and they never do. And all you think is, they didn't listen. Be careful if you're running your own business, you know, not listening to your staff, the fastest way to get them to leave. You don't even know you're doing it. So the 4 villains of listening are called the dills of listening, D-I-L-S. That's an easy way to remember it. I realized when I did a podcast in the US, the podcast host pulled me up after the podcast. It means something completely different in the US. I'll let you guys use Urban Dictionary to find that out.
I'm getting onto that.
So let's see. D stands for dramatic, I stands for interrupting, L stands for lost, and S stands for shrewd. So I'm going to tell you a bit about each of these. But before I do, Jade, and for you listening, think of the worst listener that you know, the one that frustrates you the most. And what I want you to do is figure out which one of these 4 listening villains they are. So I'm going to describe the characteristics. You're thinking of the worst listener. They can't be all of these. They're going to be one of these more than anything else. So the dramatic listener, let's start off with them. The dramatic listener loves to listen to your story. They love to listen to the drama in the story, and they love to listen for emotion. They listen really carefully for emotion. They really want to get into your story. And the reason they want to get into your story is no matter what your story is, they're going to tell you a story immediately about how their life is more than that. So you go, oh, I've got a terrible manager. Oh, you think you've got a terrible manager. Let me tell you about the worst manager I ever had. Oh, I've got such a difficult issue at work with this customer. They are the customer from hell. Oh, you think you've got a customer from hell. Let me tell you about Felicity. She was the customer from hell. Now, they've got all good intentions. By the way, did you know, Jade, when you listen for emotion, you tend to tilt your ear in from the right, because that connects the brain to the left part of the brain, which helps you to listen for emotion. So if you ever notice anybody doing that, they're kind of listening for emotion. Yeah.
So I think I'm deaf in my right ear. I always lean left no matter what. Maybe that's why it's exposed. Maybe that's a thing. Oh, maybe if I do that.
Here's the thing. If you get an annual health checkup, do you get an annual hearing test done at the same time? For anybody over the age of 10 years of age, whenever you go to the doctor, you should get a hearing test. Commercial break brought to you by Hearing Australia and all the other hearing associations around the world. Because of headphones now, with people listening to music way too loud, the overall Western population is going deafer sooner because of noise pollution. A different kind of toxicity. But let's get back to the dramatic listener. Sorry for that commercial break.
I love it.
So the dramatic listener is really into you and your conversation. They really want to help, and they really get into listening for what's going on for you emotionally. But it's not helpful, because they can't but help make it all about them, and they're trying to be helpful. How are they trying to be helpful? They're trying to say, I can relate to your situation. And here's the proof point of that. So they're coming from a very relational orientation. They're coming from a very feeling orientation, but it's not productive for the conversation or the person there. So number 1, dramatic listener. Number 2, interrupting listener. They're the quiz show contestant that presses the buzzer before the host has even asked the question. And when they give the answer, it's the wrong one. The interrupting listener thinks the minute you draw breath to say the next word is their commercial break to give you the answer, right? They're going to come in. Now, interrupting listeners, they're trying to be helpful too. They're just trying to get to the outcome quicker. Hey, a fast game's a good game. Let's get there. And they will solve problems really fast, but they'll solve the wrong problems every single time. So that's the interrupting listener. By the way, if you visit listeningquiz.com, you can take a 7-minute quiz, find out who you are at listeningquiz.com.
I have it sitting on my phone ready to do.
All right.
My ex-husband, he would tell you that was me.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh my God. You know how you think it's endearing to finish someone's sentence? Do not ever do it to him. Ever. Ever in your entire life. Even if it's like for a song and you're like helping them sing the rest. No.
Shall we move off the interrupting listener? Or should we hang here and spend a bit more time unpicking them? No, we'll move on. If you were listening on the podcast, Jade shaking her head all over the place. She does not want to stay in this space. If I held this space for a little bit longer, she'd be going, trust has gone down with you, Oscar. It's not a good thing. Let's talk about the lost listener. So the lost listener kind of comes to a group meeting and kind of wonders why they were invited. They're not sure why they're there, but they think it's nice that they've been invited. They're kind of vague and they're trying to make sense of the conversation. Or they know why they're in the meeting. They know their purpose in the meeting, but they're on their mobile phone. They're on their laptop, their tablet, their device. They might be writing notes down about the last meeting and the actions they should take. And they look like, and it feels like they're really vague in the meeting and they're not paying attention and they're kind of zoned out. That's how most people describe the lost listener. And the reason the lost listener is lost, they don't ask this question. How would you like me to participate in this meeting? If the lost listener asks that question, 9 times out of 10, they probably don't even need to be there if it's a group meeting. But if it's a one-on-one, you'll probably get a really good answer and you'll know how to listen. Now, the next listener, the last listener, is a shrewd listener. The shrewd listener, disproportionately represented in the sales profession, disproportionately represented in entrepreneurs, disproportionately represented in really smart people like doctors, lawyers, accountants, architects, anybody who takes a brief, a physiotherapist, an osteopath, a dentist, anybody who takes a brief. Tell me why you're here today. If you ever use that phrase, there's a good chance you're the shrewd listener. This is what's going on with the shrewd listener. Imagine there's closed captioning going on at the bottom of this screen, Jade, right? And I say to you, so what brings you here today, Jade? And all that's going through my head is I'm giving you awesome eye contact. I'm holding my arm and resting my fingers on my chin and I'm looking intently at you and I'm nodding. I'm giving you really good, tell me more. Wow, that must be hard. Okay, here's what's going on in closed captioning in the shrewdie's mind. Oh my God, that is the world's most basic problem. They've got 5 other problems they don't even know they've got. I wish they'd hurry up because I'm an expert. This is a basic problem. I can solve that. Oh my goodness. It's taking them a really long time to describe that. If only I could stop biting my tongue because it's bleeding. They're so lucky to have me working for them. Anyway, I'll wait for them to finish. And while you sew up yourself in your own head, you're missing out on all the gold. You're not noticing how they're breathing. You're not noticing their body language. You're not noticing the patterns in their voice. You're not noticing where they're speaking from here or whether they're speaking from here. And when their vocal cords get a bit fried, you're not listening for the emotion, which is a really good signal to what matters the most for them. So Jade's already outed herself. She was the interrupting listener. The person you were most frustrated with, whoever that is, I think the postie's here.
Probably. He'll come through. He's started to recognize the light.
And whichever listener you said that was the most frustrating person that you've ever worked with or related to, here's a dirty little secret. That's probably going to be you. You can only relate the most to the person you are the most. Now, by the way, you are not a dramatic listener, an interrupting listener. You are a fully formed human, Jade. You just happen to have some interrupting tendencies. And if you take the quiz, listeningquiz.com, we give you a personalized action plan for 3 things to do about that, so we can move you from distracted to a deep listener, and you can have an impact beyond words.
I love that. I love that. I did learn. I did learn from the ex-husband, and this was years ago. But it was, but I think maybe it was more the shrewd in me coming out like, oh, for fuck's sake, already get to the point. Like, I've heard you tell this story a million bloody times. You've said this like 100 times. Like, can we fast forward already? Like,
Tell me more.
Yeah, I'll tell you more. To be honest, when you were saying who's the most annoying listener that you've ever heard, all I could think about was myself. I get frustrated at myself.
Here's a closing piece of statistics to tell you what the problem with listening is and why 100 million deep listeners in the world will make a massive difference. 84% of us think we're above average car drivers.
Oh.
83% of us think we're above average IQ. And 82% of us think we're above average listeners. And none of us have been taught how to listen. So what benchmark have we got? The funny thing is, with no training whatsoever, I can tell you when you're not listening to me, but you have no idea what you're doing when you're not listening to me. And that's why I will have a lot of work ahead of me, Jade. I have a lot of work ahead of me, and I'm really grateful to share that with your listener today.
I'm really grateful that you're going to teach me what my cues are. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much. Can I ask can I be cheeky and just ask you to share one really quick thing?
Sure.
Just because you alluded to it earlier about the diagonal sitting with teenagers.
Yeah. So I had the great opportunity to interview Dr. Justin Coulson, who has 7 kids, all girls.
Well, he was a bad boy when he was younger than. My dad says the more girls you get, the naughtier you were as a kid. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, if my good friend Luke was listening to this, he would agree with you wholeheartedly. He's got 3 girls, and growing up, he was definitely in that category. But Dr. Justin Coulson's also written 9 books on raising children. And he's got a PhD in child psychology, but he's got the practical experience of 7 girls and his marvelous wife. And some tips for listening to kids. If Justin was here with us now, the first thing he would say is make sure you're at eye level at all times. So if you're talking to younger kids and you say, are you listening to me? Well, the good chance is that where your voice is projecting is over their head. So they're going to have even difficulty hearing you. So if they're younger kids, either bring them up to the bench and look at them in the eye, or squat down at their eye level when you're talking to them. And if you're FaceTiming them or you're calling them, you still need to do that. It will get your mindset down to their level so you can communicate effectively. Humans are wired for awesome communication when we're looking at each other in the eye. So that's for the younger kids. For teenagers, if you've got teenage boys, if you want to get them to listen, get them doing something with their hands. Maybe it's chopping up vegetables, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's fishing, or get them out in the outdoors. They could be in the passenger seat and you're driving. When eye contact for teenage boys is not direct, at least diagonal, but at best you're both gazing, looking ahead, that's where great listening takes place. For teenage girls, they value intimacy more, and you're better off having a milkshake with them at the local cafe or sitting down at home looking at them eye to eye. And Justin would often say that just eye contact alone, or knowing eye contact, is really, really critical. So for boys, get them doing something with their hands, or drive or walk around the block when you're having that conversation with them. It's easier to get the mobile phone out of their hands if you're walking around the block too. That's a bit harder to coordinate for the teenage boys. And for teenage girls, yeah, just one-on-one at the local coffee shop, milk bar, whatever the case may be, that will make a huge difference. They will definitely feel heard, and they'll probably put the dirty dishes away in the dishwasher next time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because again, I listened to that on your podcast this morning about a part of that. I was like, oh, wow, that makes a lot of sense. I thought that could really add value to the listeners that are struggling to get, why these kids don't listen to me.
Yeah, the reason they're not listening to you is because you are role modeling bad listening to them, and they're copying you.
Yeah.
Everybody goes, I never had a listening teacher. You did. It's called your parents. And if your parents listen to you well, there's a good chance you listen well. And if you didn't, they'd just copy that.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing.
Pleasure.
Can you now tell us, where can people find you? What's the best way for them to connect, learn more, and listen better?
Listeningquiz.com. That's the gateway to all the resources, the book, the podcast, the playing cards, the jigsaw puzzles, the 90-day challenge. If you want to sign up for a free 90-day challenge to get tips to listen better every week, you can visit listeningquiz.com. That's the best place to go.
You don't want to know what just went through my brain with that. It's like do the 90-day challenge to get laid better, because if you start listening to your wife, everyone's going to be happy. Happy wife, happy life.
I think I might need to change my marketing collateral all of a sudden.
Yeah, like that's a whole nother market for you, for sure.
Yeah, well, it's at the beginning of this week, I got an unexpected email from a book publisher, and they go, I have a vision for your book well beyond the books you've written so far. Would you be interested in a conversation? And I wonder if I can bring that into our conversation when we get together.
Yeah.
You'll get a credit in the next book, Jade.
Please. That'll make me very happy.
Listen more, get laid more.
Yeah.
Okay.
90-day challenge for listening to get you laid more.
We'll have to give credit to Mick.
That shit will sell books. Really. How listening is laid. So think about that in going through, well, those things called airports that we used to go through.
Mm.
You usually see the subtle art of not giving a fuck, or everything is fucked, a book about hope. You see these because it's like shock value, stop the scroll, stop the walk, right? I feel like your book could be just right there next to Mark Manson.
All right, you'll be invited to the book launch.
Excellent. I'm here to serve. Amazing, amazing. Well, guys, this has been a super fun episode for me. Some penny drop moments. I've been writing notes as we go through. I've got some great hacks now for how I can be a better listener. I'm going to leave that part out in the brain. Nope, don't say that bit. If anyone thinks that someone else needs to listen a little better, or you feel like you're not being heard, make sure you share this episode with them. Thank you so much, Oscar. I look forward to staying in your field and learning more about your work.
Thanks for listening.
Bye, guys. Hey there, barrel chasing business owners. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of the show. What I would love for you to do, if you feel like you got any value or entertainment out of this episode at all, is to leave us a 5-star review and comment below so that we can share the message and impact as many business owners like you as possible. Thanks.